Welcome back, everybody, to Chazin-the-Dream. I'm your host, Ethan Chazin, and I'm really excited today to introduce to everybody Daria Cervantes, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the ARC of Montgomery County in Maryland. And for those who are uninitiated, the ARC's mission is to connect people of all ages and abilities with their communities to build inclusive and fulfilling lives. And for over 60 years now, the ARC of Montgomery County has supported children, youth, adults, seniors, and families affected by disabilities like autism and Down syndrome by providing a various range of services, including childcare, work skills training, employment, community living services, resources, respite care, and advocacy. And the ARC has over 400 employees, and they serve people of all ages, from literally 6 weeks old to end of life. And as Daria has said before, they truly do provide the arc of a lifetime. So welcome to Chasing the Dream, Daria.
Thank you so much, Ethan. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's our pleasure. And so what I was hoping we could start out with was how you came about your experience finding the arc of Montgomery County and your experience in your role as CEO.
Well, I grew up with a cousin who had Down syndrome, so disability was just part of my life, and he was a very integral part of our family. So when it came time to start looking for jobs after graduating high school, I came across this position at the ARC, and actually, I didn't even realize it was at the ARC due to the way the job ad in the Washington Post was phrased. I didn't realize it was the ARC, and actually we had a different name back then, but I didn't realize it was the ARC until I got on site for the interview. And I thought, okay, well, I'm fresh out of college. I'll give this a try for 6 months, see how it goes. And almost immediately, I was totally hooked on the mission. Seeing that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities had real jobs and jobs that were making a difference to the employers that they worked for, seeing that people had true friendships, seeing that people with disabilities were living lives just like the kind of life I wanted to live, it really got me hooked in. And 35 years later, that 6 months certainly expanded into way more than I anticipated. And I really found this to be an organization that fed my passions and helped me do things I thought I wasn't capable of, let alone supporting other people to do things to make their dreams come true.
I mean, it's just unbelievable to think about a 6 month engagement turning into 35 years. And also in terms of the narrative arc of your experience there, you've been there for 35 years in an organization's 60-year life cycle. So you've been there for over a half of its existence. And I'm just really curious with what have you noticed or experienced in terms of the transformation of the arc of Montgomery County, its values, the way it engages the community, the kind of people who are passionate to come work there.
Well, our core values have always stayed the same. It's always been about um, supporting people with disabilities and supporting their families so that people can live lives that they're choosing, that they're directing, that they're making the decisions in. That hasn't changed over the 35 years. What has changed is everything going on around us. So when we first started using the word inclusion, nobody was using it. And we kept talking to each other, should we use this word? Nobody knows really what it means. And then within a couple of years, inclusion became a buzzword. So everybody now knows what the word inclusion means. But often it's thought about in terms of, racial identity, ethnic identity, gender identity. I think disability is still often left out of the inclusion discussion. And if disability is brought up, it's often in terms of physical accessibility. So people who use wheelchairs or walkers or people who may have visual impairments. I think we still have a long way to go towards getting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities fully included in community life, but we're certainly light years ahead of where we were 35 years ago when I started.
And it's interesting you talk about this notion from a community who with disabilities, what inclusion originally meant, and now how it's been embraced kind of universally by a lot of, um, I guess, communities. But I guess my question is, can you walk through what that exclusion, inclusion, integration, the kind of journey of what have you've noticed have been the stages of communities with disabilities, their kind of flow process in terms of being connected to their communities.
Sure, absolutely. So, when I started at the ARC, we were more in the integration phase. So prior to 35 years ago, a lot of things for people with all types of disabilities was very exclusionary. There were institutions where people were sent to oftentimes right after birth, with medical professionals telling family members that that their children would never have a meaningful life, that bringing that child home would be disruptive to the flow of the rest of the family. And so many people grew up in institutions and sadly spent their entire lives in institutions. So that is a very stark example of what exclusion was, and sadly around this country still is in some areas. Um, Moving towards integration, we did things, for example, when I started my career here at the ARC, we had a sheltered workshop in Rockville, and we had different types of work that was brought into our building. And we supported people to complete the work. A lot of it was assembling mailing, so collating papers, folding, stuffing envelopes, doing some small packaging. That was exclusionary because that was a building that was designated for people with disabilities to work in. But simultaneously, we were also doing something called supported employment. And that is where we were helping people to find jobs, often through a contract between the employer and the ARC. But it was a more integrated setting because people were working out in the community at a business and they had coworkers who didn't have disabilities, so they had the opportunity to work alongside people without disabilities. And to make employment, for example, extremely inclusionary and inclusive, we have situations now where we support them to find a job. It is a job that they are hired into by the employer. They have the same benefits and job perks, so to speak, that their coworkers have, and their disability isn't a big part of the employment relationship. They work at a company, they happen to have a disability, they happen to get support services from the ARC, but they're really seen as a coworker, a valued team member, an employee of the organization. So we've really run the gamut. The same thing with the way people are choosing to live. People have gone from living into institutions to living in apartments where their name is on the lease. So we've really run the gamut. To say everything is perfect and all the problems have been solved would be an overstatement, but we are certainly getting there. And I think what's been most noticeable to me over my 35 years is when we meet people who are teenagers, young adults, who have an intellectual or developmental disability, they can tell us exactly what they want. And it's not working in a sheltered workshop, and it's not living in a group home with four people they never met before. They want to have their own place. They want to be out of mom and dad's house. They want to have fun things to do on the weekends and after work, and they really want the same type of life that, their age peers are looking for.
Hmm. Thank you kind of for walking through the journey of the transition and how the people that you serve are kind of included and what that word of inclusion means. And I guess listening to kind of you talk about the mission there and the services provided, I'm curious about your thoughts about the kind of person who would come to work at the Ark and the kind of employees that you may look for and the kind of characteristics that you would ideally like to have in an employee that you would say they represent what we've been attempting to accomplish here over the last 60 years.
Sure. People who work at the Ark and make a difference in the lives of the people that we support, it it needs to be something that they truly believe in. It can't be, hey, this is a job. It's got to be their personal mission as well. A lot of the work that our direct support professionals do, and that's what we call the employees who work directly with people that we're supporting. Um, a lot of it is work that maybe isn't always glamorous, maybe isn't always something that when they go home at the end of the day and they're telling their family or friends what happened at work that day, that is necessarily relatable to others who don't work here. But it's really got to be something that they believe in to their core for them to be a truly successful employee at the Ark. And you're probably sitting there thinking, well, how do you find those people? They find
Meg,
us. They find us. It's amazing to think of, over 30 years, 35 years, there have been thousands of people who have been employees here. So it's amazing to think that there are that many people who are interested in doing this type of work because it's personally meaningful to them. Some people, like I, grew up with a family member who had a disability, but some people, come across it kind of accidentally and it rings a bell for them. Some people had an experience by having a classmate or a colleague who had a disability. So people come to it from all different perspectives, but the ones who stick around and the ones who really make a difference are the ones where it's part of their personal mission to make lives of people with disabilities better and make them more included in our community.
I mean, the idea of candidates, job seekers, selecting the ARC because they share your values and they have already bought into what you do for the community. I mean, that to me is a little bit of a foreign concept, you would think, to a lot of organizations where you have people who are vetting you as an
Mm-hmm.
employer. And I guess I'm just so fascinated with, given what you just said about them finding you for a variety of reasons that they have, how then do you create or foster or strengthen that culture that they're coming to you because you've already established almost a reputational brand?
So, this organization being 65 years old, when I came on board as CEO about 4 years ago, there were a lot of things that I saw that needed to be changed. And the more we delved into them, the more I understood why they hadn't been changed. Because change is very, very hard and it's very, very tiring.
Mhm.
So, you know, I, I kind of use the adage of, when you're on an airplane and they're going over the flight instructions and they say, if the masks come down, put your mask on first before you assist the person next to you. And that's kind of the way I've looked at it with our employees. If we can't keep our employees happy and keep their oxygen flowing, then they're not going to be able to provide the kind of supports that we want to provide for people with disabilities. So we made a couple of big changes in the last couple of years that I think had a very positive impact on our employees, one of which was our holiday policy. So for the entire time I've worked here, we were closed for the same holidays that, typical businesses are closed for, the 10 major holidays. with the exception of our community living program. So we support about 100 people in 33 homes across Montgomery County, and they're people's homes. So your house never closes, my house never closes. It's a 24/7 operation. So how do those employees get to take advantage of holidays? And for the longest time, those employees, who are actually our largest group of employees, got no paid holidays whatsoever. The only holidays they got paid for were if they worked on Thanksgiving Day or Christmas Day, they got paid time and a half. Or if they worked a holiday, of course, they got paid, but they didn't get those days off the way all the other employees did. And clearly, we can't give every person who works in our homes off on those holidays. But we needed to find a way to create some equity so that those employees could get the same number of paid days off as the rest of the organization. At the same time, we started to look at disability, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And we have a very large immigrant workforce. We're very lucky to have employees from all around the world who are here at the ARC Montgomery County. And the holidays that we recognize here in the US weren't necessarily meaningful to them. And there was no mechanism for people who didn't celebrate traditionally American or traditionally Christian holidays to get a paid day off without dipping into their annual leave. So we created a holiday policy where we don't designate holidays anymore. Many of our locations are closed on specific days, but if employees who are stationed there want to work and use their holiday on a different day, they're able to do that. For employees who work in our homes, they are now able to take off 11 days of their choosing on days that are meaningful to them and get paid for them, which is something brand new to that group of employees. And we intentionally did not put a lot of restrictions on it when we rolled it out. A lot of people said to us, well, the days should have to be used within a week of the actual holiday. And we just wanted to let it kind of free flow and see how it would play out. And it's played out really wonderfully. And one of the unintended consequences, which is usually a negative thing, but in this case, it was a very positive thing. When employees first onboard with us, it takes them a while to accrue their annual leave, but the holidays are available to them immediately. So if they wanted to take, a week off in the summer, they could use that holiday leave, even if they hadn't accumulated enough annual leave to take the week off. So it's really been a win-win for everybody. And I think it's made all of us more aware of how important being able to take time off on days that you need the time off is to everyone. And that's something that we've been able to do. And I think it's worked out really great for everyone.
And the notion of allowing your people to pick and choose when they need to step away. We were just talking before we started the show about the value of being able to get away and decompress. And especially, I would imagine your workforce being so dedicated and on your mission. I would imagine that that can be a little bit, dare I say, emotionally draining because they are, as you said, so committed.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when you're working to support someone, the relationship that you build with that person or those people, in many cases our DSPs are supporting more than one person, those relationships become very close. And it's almost a symbiotic relationship in some sense where something good happens for the person, the DSP feels good about it. Something bad happens to the person, the DSP feels bad about it. So yes, absolutely needing to take the time off to recharge and be able to step away, knowing the person who's so important in your life is left in good hands of another colleague who's stepping in for you. It's important for the DSP, but it's also important for the person we support, because it makes it easier. Not everyone stays at the ARC for 35 years. We wish they would, but sometimes people move on, and that causes a transition in the life of the person that we're supporting. So I think having that opportunity to have other people step in and provide the supports, it's really beneficial on both sides.
And I guess, also the idea of you having been there for 35 years and experienced, such a length of tenure, given the organization's history. I'm curious your observations about, you know, how you take care of your employees. What are some other thoughts about how do you measure satisfaction? How do you gauge if they're burned out or they need a change of scenery? Or how do you kind of have you evolved, not just your 4 years as CEO, but just your experience there about how to as you said, how to re-oxygenate or re-energize your people?
I think it comes down to knowing the people you work with and the people you work around. So, unfortunately, I don't know all 400 employees to the point where I'm able to say, hey, John looks like he's a little stressed out. Maybe he needs a couple of days off. But I do know that with my immediate coworkers that I work with routinely. And we are working with our supervisors to be able to identify those types of things as well. We're getting ready to roll out within the next 12 months some advanced trainings for supervisors to address some of those things. We've brought wellness into the workplace. We're trying to approach it with a lot of different angles. One of the lucky things that happened to me as I was onboarding into the role of CEO was having the opportunity to create with input from all of our stakeholders, a new strategic plan. And we've really spent a lot of time working that plan. So, it's not a plan that we wrote it, congratulated ourselves, put it in a book and set it on a shelf. We're really implementing things in the plan. And we're about halfway through the process, but there are some really interesting things that we're trying to accomplish in terms of making things better for employees and employees at all levels. We're really focusing on, as I mentioned before, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and trying to form affinity groups for employees with different interests or who come from different backgrounds. We've been working on dare I say, a kinder, gentler, the ARC Montgomery County, because it can become very challenging when you're trying to schedule employees to provide the supports, and people need to take time off for various reasons. And, we're trying to move away from a culture where a supervisor would say, are you really sure you can't make this shift? Because it would really be important to
Yeah.
come in and do it, to recognizing that if an employee tells us they can't work for a specific reason, we need to honor that and we need to respect that and need to move on from that. So I think we've made a lot of progress. I think we still have quite a bit of work to do, but I think we're definitely going down the right track.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear about the focus on the diversity, the equity, inclusion, which you kind of said before. I mean, in a lot of organizations, they throw that out as like the keyword du jour.
Mhm.
It's like this is the hot topic. But I'm really kind of fascinated with the letter B in that, the belonging. And how do you, given your experience at the ARC, how do you encourage your people? I mean, you talk about affinity groups, but are there other, I guess, ideas or strategies you can share about how do you create a sense of belonging? As you said, your workforce finds you and is already they've already bought in to the mission.
I think what we've been most successful at so far is just making everything from the interviewing to the onboarding process, more welcoming and more friendly. And hopefully, we're putting things in place to have that continue. So, we have done a lot of work in streamlining our orientation. We've doubled the size of our HR department, and we now have a position called onboarding manager. And
Mm.
that person's role is to really walk new employees through the process, check in with them along the way to see how things are going. And we've gone from having orientations where there were maybe 2 people, 4 people, to having groups as large as 20 or 30.
Wow.
And we've also started on that first day of orientation having nearly the entire leadership team come in to the room and personally walk around, say hello to people, introduce themselves. And then we get up in front of the room and we welcome everybody as a group. And one of the things I always like to do is because so many of our employees are direct support professionals, I like to, ask them to raise their hands if they've been hired as a direct support professional. And then I turn to the leadership team and say, and how many of us up here started our careers as direct support professionals? And about 75% of the hands go up.
Wow.
So I think that's really reassuring to people who are hired as direct support professionals to see that there's room to grow with the ARC. Some people love being a direct support professional and that's what they want to do and that's where they're going to focus. And that's fantastic. And we want those employees who want to do that to be able to stay in that role. But there are other employees who want to grow with the organization and take on greater responsibility. And we've created lots of different stepping stones along the way. We're working on a career laddering program, so people don't necessarily have to go immediately from direct support professional to supervisor. We've created some different positions along the way to give them some different experiences, some different responsibilities, as well as to increase their salaries. So I think all of these things are leading to a greater sense of belonging for our employees and seeing that the ARC is a whole organization. It's not just the house that they work in, the employment site that they work in, the classroom where our early childhood educators teach. It's a whole organization. And really, not only do we want to support people with disabilities through the arc of their lifetime, we want to support our employees through the arc of their careers as well. You're on mute, Ethan.
Yeah, my apologies. I had background noise, so I wanted to block it out. But I was so fascinated by this notion of meeting the DSPs where they are, and this idea of career and professional development and career tracking, but we're laddering. Because I've worked with a number of not-for-profits and that provide community engagement services, and their DSPs almost consistently always said, we wish our leadership team asked us what we wanted. We're so burned out. We're not appreciated. Nobody ever asks us if this is the role we want to stay in long term. And the fact that you're having that conversation with your people, I just think is so enlightening in terms of where you place your value on your people. And it's fascinating to me because I have to admit, I was watching other interviews you've done, and somebody had asked you about like your vision of the future of the arc, and you said something that I thought was really interesting. You said, in an ideal world, and I'm paraphrasing, and I hope I don't butcher this, but in an ideal world, you had said that you wish there wasn't a need for the arc, and I was just curious if you could kind of share what your thoughts were about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not often that a CEO, I think, says they wish their business or their organization didn't exist. But I don't think it's that uncommon in the nonprofit world. If we are truly successful at what we're trying to do, the supports and services that we provide will become part of our social network. We wouldn't need to have a child care center that could accept children who have medical conditions that require nursing care. All child care centers would be set up to do that. We wouldn't need to have employment programs for people with disabilities. Employers would realize the value of having a diverse workforce and having people with disabilities on their teams. Because all of the supports that we put in place, they don't just benefit people with disabilities, they benefit everyone. So to use an example that I think most people could relate to, curb cutouts and ramps to buildings, they benefit everybody. If your hands are full and you don't have to walk upstairs and you can use a ramp, yes, that was created initially for people with mobility needs, but we all are benefiting from it. So we would all benefit from going to school with children with disabilities. I mean, one of the interesting things we found through our early childhood education center is so many young people come back to visit as they're finishing high school, getting ready to enter college. And these are not students who had disabilities. These were students who were typically developing, but their experience learning and playing alongside and with children who had medical issues or had disabilities made them more empathetic. In a lot of cases, it forged their career paths towards special education or maybe going into law and specializing in disability law. I mean, the work that we do is far reaching and it touches every corner of society. So I don't think I'll see the ARC Montgomery County go out of business before I'm ready to retire. But it would be kind of neat if it happened in my lifetime. If these things just became so part of community life that there wasn't a need for organizations like the ARC and many others across our country that are doing great work, there wouldn't be a need to have an organization dedicated to providing these things for people with disabilities. It would just be part of life and it would be available wherever people with disabilities were looking to advance in their lives.
I don't know that to me, the way you frame that is just so kind of moving that I would love if we just said it's a wrap and just kind of focused on that because I think that was so important and I'd love that to be kind of our clarion swan song for the episode. But if people who were listening to us and wanted to reach out to you, they had more questions, they wanted to kind of learn a little bit more from you in your leadership role, how could people get in touch with you, Daria?
Sure. Well, you can visit our website. It's www.thearcmontgomerycounty.org. And you can access my email through there, but I will go ahead and give my email address. It's Daria, DARIAC, at arcmontmd.org. And I'd be happy to speak with, correspond with anybody who's interested in learning more about our mission and learning how they could be part of closing the doors of the ARC Montgomery County.
And Daria, just for everybody to know, I will also put the contact details below, but I just wanted to take this opportunity, Daria, to say thank you so much for coming on Chazin-the-Dream and sharing your leadership and experience at the ARC of Montgomery County.
Thank you, Ethan. It's been a real pleasure. I enjoyed our discussion.